This is part 2 of a 2-part tutorial. In the first part we covered making the skateboard that's used in these 3 animations, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk about how you would create each of these animations, and then I'm going to take the floppy fish animation and just texture it up and light it and just show you how I would set that up in Octane. Okay, so let me know in the comments below if there's any other work of mine that you'd like to see tutorials on, but other than that, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's get started. Okay, so now if you've built the skateboard in part 1 of the tutorial, then now we've got this model, you're at the same stage I'm at. I'm going to center this out just so it's kind of in the center of our screen, and maybe just bring it up so it's sitting above the grid. And I'm going to do a couple of things to prepare this. So we're going to go through how to animate the 3 different versions of the skateboard. So I'll quickly cover each one before we do texturing. So for the first 2 options, where we're kind of putting wavy and bendiness to it, we're going to use a mesh deformer, because if we actually put a bend or a twist just on this model, we might end up in a situation where parts are intersecting with other parts. It takes a long time to actually process the animation because it's trying to change all this geometry. So what we're trying to set it up for is that we actually are going to deform a simple geometry, which is then going to bend and twist this geometry. So to do that, we need to prepare our assets. So using that mesh deformer to do that, it doesn't react well with the spline wrap. So these 2 boards, we're going to make them editable objects. So let's just say current state to object, and let's delete the originals. So this one and this one. And we have a look in here, you see we've got those actual baseboards. And then for both of these, I'm going to access center. So that's kind of neatened up. And then I'm going to select both, hold down Alt and do Subdivision Surface just to add a bit more geometry to those. We'll call this top and base. And something that I realized after I did it was that we have these bolts inside the wheels. They should actually be outside. So let's leave those outside, and we'll put subdivision surfaces on those. And the same on these wheels. For some reason, when they're inside another object in a subdivision, when you do a mesh deformer, it doesn't like it. So let's just add those on as well. So then now our model is prepared for animating. Okay, so now let's add on this mesh deformer. So to do that, we go up here to our deformers, and we'll get the mesh deformer and we'll drag that in, and you'll see that, let's have a drag over, because we're putting it in a folder, it's going to affect everything within this folder. So we haven't really got many options in here. We've obviously just got this object, and the object is what we're going to use as like a reference object. So we're going to deform the reference object, and then that's going to relay that information to everything in this folder, so it deforms that as well. So the reference object we're going to get is just something very simple. So we'll just grab a cube. Let's just take this a bit higher. We just want this to cover skateboard. So let's make this, what's that, like 130 high. And maybe, let's have a look. Maybe 670 in length. See, so the skateboard is completely encapsulated within this cube. Now I'm going to go to Garage Shading with lines, because we want to deform this object. So we are going to need a certain amount of polygons, a certain amount of geometry to be able to bend to react with the skateboard below. So let's, on the X and Y, maybe put this up to 3, and then on the Z maybe we'll say like 10. Maybe we'll just try and get this a bit even. 12. There you go. So there's kind of our geometry. It's like our cage sitting around our skateboard. I might actually change this to 4 and 4, like that. Maybe this to 14. There you go. So it's like reasonably regular. Okay, so Now we want to affect this. So we're going to get the mesh that's within the skateboard. We're going to drag in the cube. And then if we hit initialize, you'll see the cube has these tags added to it, which are basically to add in this compositing tag and this kind of display tag, so it's actually viewed as a mesh. So now we can kind of see the mesh around our skateboard. Right, let's go back to garage shading, and you'll see that display tag, doesn't matter what our shading is, it actually keeps that as a mesh, so that's kind of handy. So the first thing we're going to do is just add on like a wave, which is like the simplest animation to do. To do that, I'm just going to add on a formula. And what we'll do is put that underneath the cube. And as you see, it's affecting the cube, which is then affecting the skateboard. And if I press play, see it's animating pretty quickly, even though we've got all that geometry in there. Is still actually doing that reasonably fast. So to kind of get a forward to back wave, all I'm going to do is actually offset this, maybe like to over here, and you can see how that is going. We can move it to the other side to get it to go the other way, and then within the formula we can change the size here. Let's maybe make this like 1200 by 1200. See, we've got like a nice smooth wave, and then maybe we could change the height to something like 600 to make it more intense. See, and that's looking pretty sweet. So that's kind of how you would get the wave. Another way you could do it is running the whole object along a spline wrap, but you know, this one's pretty simple way of doing it. Okay, so that's option one. Now, obviously my amount of frames I've got here at the minute is 90. Just 3 seconds, so I think I probably did it at like 120. I'm doing this at 30 frames per second, so this is a 4-second animation. With the formula effector, I think it's just set up automatically to loop like we get like 1 wave per second. So over the course of our time, oh hang on, I didn't actually change my project settings. I'm going to change that in here. So yes, it's doing 1 wave per second. So I mean, we could almost even render 1 second and that would be enough, but you might want to put some secondary animation on there of it moving up and down or something like that. Yeah, so that's a pretty simple setup. So let's have a look at the next setup, which is the kind of twist, and then we have that kind of jiggle on there as well. So how we'd set that up. Okay, so what we'll do for the twist is we'll delete that formula. And let's get a twist deformer, and in version 23 of Cinema it actually has this handy arrow to show you what way it's planning to twist on. So I'm going to rotate that through 90 degrees, and let's change the settings on here. I'm going to make this maybe like 1500 long, and I want to start it off kind of before the board, and let's set a keyframe on the Z axis, actually probably at frame 0 would be handy. And then let's maybe go to like frame 80. No, yeah, frame 80. And then I'm gonna take this all the way through. Set a keyframe. And let's just go halfway, see what we're dealing with. Get that twist. And I'm actually going to change the angle to 360. And we want to actually put it under the cube, so it is affecting our skateboard. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. We run through that. See, we're getting that nice twist, but it's just kind of, you know, finishing smoothly. And it's not doing any sort of bouncing. So we want to add a jiggle onto that as well to kind of take this up a notch and give it some kind of secondary animation. So let's just hide that cube and that twist for the moment. And what we'll do is get the jiggle effector, deformer. Let's put that underneath the twist. And just with like the standard settings, we can just play through and see what that looks like. You see, now we're getting that kind of secondary bounce animation. Within the jiggle, we can have a look at the, we've got obviously strength, stiffness, structural. Structural is obviously it's trying to maintain its structure as much as possible. So if we just took that down to 0 just to see what that looks like, you see we're getting a really exaggerated wobble, but it looks quite cool. It looks quite nice. And then drag, obviously the more drag you have, the kind of how much it kind of smooths that out. I kind of like it with a little amount of drag, and maybe we'll have like 20% structural. Maybe we'll take down the stiffness 20%, then press play. See, and wow, and now we get that nice sort of like secondary animation. And you see how I kind of made the twist end on frame 80. That's just because I wanted to leave enough time before I get to the end of my loop, because I want this to be a looping animation. I've got enough time there to let this settle down. It gets back to the initial point, and then we go back to frame 0. Okay. What I would recommend before you set anything to render that's got a jiggle on it is go to the cache and then get it to calculate the cache. And then that means if you're rendering and your render breaks down halfway for some reason, you need to render these last few frames. When you export it back out to the renderer, it can not pick up the jiggle correctly from where it left off from. So if you cache it, then the jiggle is always going to be there. So if you need to re-render part of your animation, then you can pick up from where you left off. So that's kind of a good tip there. Okay, so that's the second animation. So we're kind of getting through these pretty quick. And then the third animation was that Voronoi Fracture, which I was using to kind of take the surface off the board and then putting it back on again. So we'll have a look at that one next. Let's just delete that twist and jiggle. And actually we're going to get rid of the mesh deformer and that cube. Okay, so for this Voronoi Fracture on the top, I'm going to get this top section, move it out of the subdivision surface and delete these selection tags, and hold down Alt, and then I'm going to go up into the menu and get a Voronoi Fracture. So that's over the top of it, and obviously that's instantly broken that up. We go to the Sources tab on Voronoi Fracture and go to Point Generator. I'm going to up the amount from 20 to 200, and that gives us all of our kind of fractures. And you can change obviously the distribution, whether it goes left to right, forward to back, but for this one we want a general distribution across, so you can change it here. So you've got uniform and then normal, so in the middle, exponential, and this is where you can say, right, I want more at the back or more at the front, but I want a kind of even spread, so let's just leave it there. Okay, so with the Voronoi Fracture selected, let's get a effector. Let's get a shader effector, and let's go to the parameters. I'm going to not use scale. What I'm going to first use is position. I'm going to push all of them up by 200. So as our fall off comes through, it's going to push everything up by 200. And then I'm also going to change the rotation on each of these to 360. So it pushes them up and it spins them around. Now to add on a bit of additional animation, kind of make it look more interesting, let's go to shading, then add a noise. Let's maybe, let's give this an animation speed of 1. Maybe up the contrast a little bit just to kind of make it a bit more obvious. There we go. That's what we're dealing with. Loop period, if you were going to loop the whole animation, you would make it a loop period of 4, because I'm currently on 120 frames. I'm going 30 frames a second. So that's 4 seconds. If we press play, this should loop. So that's cool. We're not going to need that though, because we're actually going to have it so the board is flat at the beginning and the end. But for the moment, let's just leave it as is. Okay, so happy with that. So what we want to do is actually have a fall off to make this come in and then go out. So with the shader selected, let's go to fall off and let's get a linear field. And then let's rotate this. There we go. So I want that to be on 90. Maybe we'll make it a bit longer. I'm going to call this field 1 because we're going to use 2 fields here. Under remapping, I'm going to change the contour mode to curve. Gives us a kind of a nicer fall off. And let's have a look how that's going to look when it moves out. Yep, cool. I'm going to bring this out of the shader and group that. And we'll call this vector move. And then what I want to do is duplicate that vector. So let's do, actually before I do that, let's go to the shader. We've currently got this gradual moving up of all of the objects, but we can actually randomize that a little bit more by getting a random field. So let's get a random field here. See, that's randomized everything. What I want to do is change this to overlay, and that just kind of randomizes where it's lifting up here. So it just gives us a bit more interest. If I was to turn that off, it's subtle, but it's in there. So I'll leave the random field in with the shader because we're not going to animate or move the random field. We just want to move these vectors. So let's just bring this over to here. And then what I want to do is make a duplicate of that vector, that fall off. Call that 2. And then I'm actually going to invert. So this rather than fading up, this can be fading down. So let's bring that bink into the vector move, just so that we can move it together. And I'm actually going to offset this. Let's just hide the random. So you can see we've got this one is going to fade in and this one's going to fade out. So with the shader selected, let's bring number 2 above the 1 but below the overlay. So that's also being affected by the random field. We're going to change this to multiply. So now if we move through, you see now we're getting, they're lifting up and then they're going back down again. So what we want to do now is to set this up. So animate. So let's get our effector move, which controls both of these. Let's start it off before the skateboard. Press a keyframe. Let's go to frame 120 and then we'll bring it all the way through. Another keyframe. And there's our animation. Now what we might want to do is let's go back in this shader. Got the animation speed. Maybe we would want to, make that quicker. Maybe we want to up the contrast so it kind of gives it some, more variation. But you can just have a play around. The only other thing that's in this animation, obviously, is the floor, and the floor is pretty simple. All that is cube. Let's just say we'll leave it at 200 by 200. Maybe we'll make it like 20 high, and then we'll put that into a cloner. We'll hold down Alt, bring that into a cloner, and then we'll do a honeycomb array. Let's make that Y XZ. The size, maybe we'll make this like 202 by 202, so that gives us kind of a little gap. And then we will change, let's make this 200 by 200 because it'll make it easier for doing the math for working out the positioning. And let's change this to 198 by 198, and then maybe this cube will add a fillet on. Yeah, 3, that's good. Okay, let's cloner and move it down. And then we just want to make sure that this fills the screen. So let's zoom in. And maybe let's change the count height, I think it is. There we go. To 20. We want to make this maybe a lot more than we need because we're going to need to actually animate it through the scene. So there we go. So it's currently, we'll go to frame 0, and this is currently at 0. Now these are let's figure out, like, these are all 200 each, obviously. So let's move up through. Let's just do, maybe we'll do 2000. Set a keyframe. Go to the end. Oh, actually, I've done this the wrong way around. We want to start back here. So let's just say minus 2000. Set a keyframe. And then maybe we want to say 2000. Set a keyframe. And let's just see. Yeah, it's lined up, but our obviously we've got a cut. We've got a few sticking out there, and a few at the beginning. So to sort out the beginning, we can make the height more. So let's just change this to 60, 70. There you go. Then to the other side. Oh, that's fixed it before because it's pushed it out either end. So now, actually, if we go to our dope sheet, we want to make sure that that cloner for the pavement, it has a linear motion to it rather than an easing in or out. We press play, and now you can see our skateboard is animating, moving forever. Probably a bit fast, so we could probably actually change this. So let's go for the positioning. Maybe we'll go like minus 1000, and then on the end frame we'll do 1000. Keyframe, that's better. And then obviously you could animate these wheels. You could, all we've got to do is just rotate those over the length of time, and that's our animation done. Okay, cool. So that's that. So now the next thing to do is we'll I think I'll go back to the floppy skateboard, and we'll set that one up for Octane with materials. Okay, we'll do that next. So let's put that wavy curve back on again. So I'll just quickly do that. We'll just bring in a cube, and we're gonna make it like 670, right? And then we're gonna bring in that mesh, put that in here. Our cube, we're gonna change the amount. Let's just change this to, I'm gonna say 6 by 620, and then I'm gonna add that into the mesh deformer. Into the mesh deformer, initialize that. So now it's being mesh deformer into itself. Bring the cube in, initialize that. Now we've got back to our mesh, and I think I'll probably go with that formula and affect that. Let's make this. Yeah, I'm going to say like 1200 by 1200. Maybe make that like 600. I'm going to shift this along. And this is already you've already got some preset animation here, because the formula effector has the animation kind of baked in. So you don't even need any keyframes for this animation. So let's just set this up for how we'd render it. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my screen. So this is how I did it for YouTube, Instagram. So let's do 1000 by 1250. I'm actually going to run at 30 frames a second. I'll say all frames. We'll just say this is for 3 seconds at the moment. Let's bring in a camera. And actually I'll put a Octane tag on that. I'm going to change my camera to tele mode. I'm going to hide that cube. Then maybe go for this sort of view, similar to had in my render. You know, we can see what's going on. Maybe we want to see a little bit. I think I might have added a little bit of rotation in my final animation. Oh, you can rotate the cube to do this. You know, if you want to see underneath, maybe you want to see the underneath of the board, we'll do something like that. Then you kind of see the top of the board, but you at least get to see all that work that we did underneath as well. Okay, right, so now we want to texture this up. So let's open Octane, add this in, see what we're dealing with. I'll probably start off with the path tracing, and I'll hit the lock. That locks it to size. This is like to render size, but maybe I'll make it like 0.6. It's a 0.6 or 60%. Okay, maybe we'll look something like that. Okay, and then we can just set this up. So I'll save that. Okay, so I'm going to start off by bringing in Hdri. So let's go to here, objects. We want to bring in Hdri environment, and then I have this Canada Montreal Loft Max Sunny. So this is actually not the same as what I used in my original render, but it's more that I was able to try and find free alternatives. And I'll share the links below so you can at least follow along with this tutorial. So as you can see actually see the apartment in the background. Now there's a couple of ways of doing this. We could put a floor in, which I'll probably will. Actually, no, we won't put a floor in for this one. I'll show you how to get around it. So let's just call this Hdri. And then what I'm going to also bring in is a texture environment, which is just white. So I'm just going to call this white. But then if we click on the tab here under type, rather than primary environment, we're going to change that to visible environment. So it's visibly, we can see the white, but we're taking the Hdri information from the Hdri below. Okay, let's click on. So this is our primary and this is our visible. Right, so I think we'll do the kind of fishy skateboard that I did, the black and white fishy one. And I think for that, the metal parts are actually made like a gold. So let's go to materials, metallic. Let's call this like gold. And then I think what I might do is actually create another camera. Change to that one. And I'm just gonna zoom in to see what this looks like. So let's add this onto, I think this is the truck's back. Yeah, put that on that axle. Or maybe I didn't get that right. Maybe it's the front. Yep, there we go. Okay, so we've got that kind of standard silver material. So let's go to the specular, and then we can actually change the color of the specular. So we want to change this to like a goldy, orangey, yellowy color. See, something like that. Maybe I'll make it a bit lighter, a bit more yellowy, like that. And I'm going to add some roughness in. Open that up. And maybe that's a bit too yellowy, so let's just go back to our specular. Maybe I'll really lighten that up. Yeah, I think that's probably nicer. A bit nicer the less there is. So the roughness, I'm gonna take that down a tad. So we've got that reflection in there, so that's cool. Okay, so then I'm going to add that to our other parts. So I'm going to add it in here. I'm going to add it onto our bolts. This is the only disadvantage of not doing duplicate parts, is because usually you'd want to color up one item, and then that will obviously amend all of them. Okay, so let's do the same over here. It kind of looks a bit trippy when it's all wonky like this. This onto all the metals. Oh, actually this bit's metal as well, isn't it? Yeah. It's metal, metal. This is a pretty tripped out skateboard, I guess. Cool. Nice. Yeah, and we want to add it on there. Okay. So we can probably go back to our other camera so we can kind of see what that looks like. So it looks pretty nice. Oh, we want to put it on our screws on the top as well. So if we go to our board, we've got our screws here. We can just literally drag that to there. So we can see we've got those gold. That's white, obviously, because it's right in the brightness. Yeah. Okay, so next let's do the wood. This is going to be a material that I've downloaded from polygons, or material assets. So we'll create a glossy material, call this wood, and then I am going to go to the node editor, and we'll bring in an image texture, take that into the diffuse layer, grab that wood texture, And then let's throw that onto the base. And if I go to my other camera, you can see it actually on Skateboard there. Okay, so it's pretty shiny, and it also seems to be running the wrong way. So let's go to add a UV transform, and we'll rotate it 90 degrees along the Z. And then I think I'm just going to increase the scale a little bit to, you know, we can see more of that grain. So with that done, let's bring in another image texture, and I'm going to put this into the roughness. So there's a couple of things you could do. For roughness, you could obviously just increase it overall. That gives it an overall kind of less shininess, and that might be good enough. Or if what we're going to do is actually bring in an image that's supplied in the polygon set of images, we can apply that, and that has obviously got that kind of wood texture in it. We need to make sure that it's tied up size wise with the actual wood, so we can pump the transform into the transform here so that matches. And then what we could probably do is add a Octane gradient in between the two here, which is black and white, and we can use this to kind of crunch the levels to make it either shinier or rougher. So we could probably solo that so we can see it, and then you see we can kind of play around with it so we can kind of crush it, so we'll get some shiny bits and some not so shiny. So we'll disable that. I've got it mostly shiny at the moment, so let's actually go the other way. Make it more white to it, a bit of black. There we go. There you go. So it kind of just mixes it up a little bit. And then let's add in another image texture, and I think this comes with some normals, so let's just see what they are like. We've got some normals here, so let's add that in. So that adds in a little tiny bit of bump, I guess, because it's quite a smooth wood. Don't get too much. We'll add one more, just see if there actually is a bump in there. Let's just bring in this displaced channel, which I'm assuming has got a bit of a bump. So let's just add a little bit extra in. So I think that's good. We've just got you know, enough information there to get that wood. So I think that looks quite nice. Okay, cool. So the next thing we'll do is we've got these rubber bits. So let's save this. I'm gonna go materials. We'll get a glossy. We'll call this like black rubber. I don't know if this will be the wheels. Let's go to the node editor, and what shall we do? Okay, let's just obviously make these black. Maybe actually these would be for like the little rubber rings and things like that. So maybe we'll just, you know, add a bit of roughness on there. That might do us. They're so small. Go to our other camera. Let's add those on. So we did put a folder of those washers. We can add that on there. We've got that buffer section, that bit at the top. We want to do that on the other one. So let's add washers, buffer. But then we've just got the wheels left to do in our top. So let's go to this view. Let's save where we're at. Okay, and so for the wheels, we could probably, just to have a play around, we could actually do a specular material. Might be a bit more interesting. We'll get a bit of kind of light leak maybe. So let's just give it a go. So let's create a material, specular. Let's call this wheels. And I'm going to add these onto the wheels. So let's there, add it on here. Obviously there, I mean, look pretty cool in glass. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the roughness up on these, move this around, and then I think I'm going to add a medium, and I'm going to add a scattering. And you see here we can change the density, make them more or less dense. Actually put that quite up. You see we're getting a little bit through there. Actually actually make these a little bit more grey. So under transmission, I'm going to have a play, add a little bit of blue in there, and then under medium, go to scattering, and add a float texture in here. I think it's so thick it's not affecting it. Bring this down a tad. Yeah, I think we've got kind of that rubberiness to it. Now we could obviously add, and what I haven't done on here, like on the gold, is add on any roughness. We could like roughen that up a little bit on the gold maybe. Let's let's add in here an image texture, and I'm going to put this into the roughness, and let's maybe, no, I won't put that one. I've got these couple of like smudges and fingerprints. I'm going to grab this fingerprints texture, this one, just have that on there. Maybe this will just help to break up that gold a little bit. So at the minute you see the whole thing is pretty rough, but we want to kind of get that difference between the shiny and the rough. So let's add a gradient on there. Let's solo this node, and then let's, seems to be having issues with soloing that. Let's just have a play around. Let's just move this rad. You see how we're getting like shiny sections and rough sections? You can kind of tweak this. Maybe I'll bring this. The more I bring this up, the shinier it gets. But see, we get this roughness and that in there. This makes it a bit more interesting. You can see how we've got those. Oh, you know what I didn't do in the wood? I didn't go. Let's open the wood up. It's the node editor. I didn't actually tie up the bump and the normal with those. So the bump and the normal are actually running the wrong way. So let's add that transform into there, and I'll transform into here. And now that is actually running along. So that makes much more sense. Okay, so that's that done. So now we just want to do the top part. So let's go to our other camera view. Now all those bits are done, we can kind of see all the cool stuff going on there. Let's rotate this cube around a little bit more just so we get to see a little bit of that underside. Cool. Right, so now we just want to do this top part of the skateboard. I'm going to rotate this back around again just so I can see the top. Okay, so let's create a Octane Glossy. I'm going to call this surface. Okay, so now what I want to do is put obviously that fish on the surface, but I've done it black and white, but you can set it up in a way where you could obviously change the icon, whatever it is, logo, fish, whatever, and the background like 2 different colors. You can change that on the fly in here using a couple of layers. So let's I'm going to bring in an image texture. And what I've got is this icon of a fish. This could obviously be anything, a logo, whatever, words, text. We'll add that into the diffuse layer. And let's put it on surface so I can see what that looks like. Obviously very big. So let's do a couple of things. Let's add a UV transform and let's scale him right down. Maybe we'll go to something like that, and you can see straight away obviously he is duplicating. Now he doesn't need to always duplicate, you can change it. It's set to wrap around. You can change it to black color, and that basically means you've only got one, and then the rest of the space is black. I think he's actually off screen, that's why we can't see him. So if we just do wrap around, then we get like a lot of duplicates. So I'm going to have him like that, and then rotate him. So let's do that, so we end up with this pattern. Now, you know, what would you do if you wanted to make the fish red and the board green, for instance? or you could do multiple layers, or you could actually use a mix cube here, this node. So what we can do is actually change our image texture to be the amount that we're mixing by. So one texture is going to be where it's white, and one texture is going to be where it's black. So let's just add in an RGB spectrum, bring that into here, then we can change that color. That's our background color, so we can make that whatever we wanted to. I'm just going to go to almost black. It means we can tweak it, and then let's just bring in another RGB, which is going to be for our fish. So for this one, obviously you could change that whatever color you wanted. So yeah, red, whatever. So I think I'll probably make it kind of a slightly off white, something like that. So then our board itself is very obviously very smooth. We want to add some roughness in there, so let's do that. We do that kind of in a similar way to what we did with the wood. So let's bring in an image texture, right? And I'm going to add this into the roughness channel, and let's get this. I've got this smudges there. This isn't exactly right for what you'd want to do for this, but I was just trying to get free options. But you can find like grunge maps online, and then you can kind of layer them up and use them to kind of roughen this up. So at the minute it's mostly black, so it's mostly knocked out. So let's add a gradient in there, and then let's see if solo node works. Yeah, we can actually see it. So now we can crunch these levels, so we kind of get a lot more contrast. Let's go back, disable that. Can't quite see it because I guess it's picking up the shininess here, but we've got that added roughness in. And what I'm actually going to do is copy this, and then I'm going to do a multiply. I'm basically going to multiply two textures together. I'm going to multiply this one. Actually, that would be too black. Let's get a different image. There was like a whiter version, so let's get this. Right, so this is just multiplying like you would in Photoshop. And then I'm going to get that kind of finger smudge image. Obviously, like I said, you can get any sort of gradients. This is the result of those two. It's multiplied those two together. And we can maybe put that in the bump channel. See, we can add this roughness in there. So we've got that like nice roughness to the board. Then maybe that might mean that, let's take off. Yeah, we might even be able to take off the roughness on there, because we've got so much like fine detail in here that is roughening the board up. Yeah, see, like that. So that is basically how I made the skateboard animations, and how I textured it up. I think my rendering was like about 4 seconds long, so 120 frames. I've kind of graduated up to 30 frames a second, down from 25. Yeah, that's how you do that. So I hope this tutorial wasn't too rambling. I haven't done it for quite a while, so this was kind of my first crack at getting back into it again. But I hope you found it useful. I'll probably try and make my next tutorial something short and sweet. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you soon. Cheers. Bye.